What's going on, guys? Alpha the Wizard back at it with another video. Today, we're just going to go over the new Kashtira cards post-Photon Hypernova. So we did receive one wave of support already. So we received the cards like Kashtira Fenrir, which this card has been pretty popular in the current format and the format before this as well. So yeah, this card has been like the better one that has seen quite a bit of play before the new support. And then we do have Kashtira Unicorn. This card is pretty good as well. A lot of you might not know what this does unless you're into Kashtira cards. However, Kashtira Unicorn functions very similar to Fenrir. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, you can search a Kashtira spell. Fenrir searches a monster, so they kind of go hand in hand. Also, during when this card declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and banish one monster from it face down. So Unicorn is pretty good. Like, it's not a bad one. I'll say, like, post Photon Hypernova, I think this card just gets infinitely better. Fenrir is really good right now because it's splashable in other strategies. However, in the pure Kashtira strategy, I think Unicorn might be the more dominant one, just because the spells that it can search just have a much higher impact. And then, of course, we have the Kashtira Ogre, which this is one of the weaker Kashtira monsters. A lot of people probably wouldn't play it, though. But, I mean, it has its applications. Basically, it functions similar as the other two, except it's a little bit worse. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, during your main phase, you can add a Kashtira trap card. I think a lot of the trap cards are pretty slow, so you don't really want to prioritize playing too many of them, which makes this card worse. But also, when this card declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can excavate up to 5 cards from the top of your opponent's deck and banish one excavated card face down. So, I mean, it's not bad. It doesn't really take away from their card advantage. You're more so just tying into the banishing cards face down. And then, yeah, so this one's one of the worst ones. But then we have Kashtira Birth. This is basically the monster reborn of the deck. And it has a couple cool little cute effects as well. You can normal summon level 7 monsters without tributing. Also, during your main phase, you can special summon one of your non-XYZ Kashtira monsters that is banished or in your graveyard. So it's basically a monster reborn on steroids. If your opponent activates a spell card or effect and you control a Kashtira monster, you can target 3 cards in your opponent's graveyard and banish them face down. So yeah, that effect might come up quite a bit in the Tier Elements matchup. I think what Konami's trying to do with Kashtira is they're trying to create like the perfect counter for Tier Elements. However, I don't know. Tier is just such a good deck until it gets hit. But then, the other card that we currently have already from the new wave is Kashtira Preparations. Now, during either player's turn, you can special summon a Kashtira monster that's banished or in your hand. And if your opponent activates a trap card or effect and you control a Kashtira in the face-up spell, and this card is already in your face-up spell and trap zone, look at your opponent's hand, and if you do banish a card from it face down. So this is like one of the weaker ones because it definitely takes a little bit more preparation. But yeah, so these are the ones that we have already. We also have Shangri-La already. This is, the boss monster in the new wave of support as well. So once we get the new stuff, this card just gets way better. Basically, if you're not familiar how it works, during each standby phase, you can summon a Kashtira monster from your deck. So it's just free. There's no cost to that portion or anything. Also, each time a card your opponent owns and possesses is banished face down, you can basically block off a monster zone or a spell and trap zone while this is face up on the field. So this card comes up with the new cards. So now that we kind of just covered the older Kashtiras that we received in the new wave of support, let's dive into the new ones because they're very exciting. So the one that a lot of people's hyping up more than anything is Tier Element's Kashtira, mainly because this card inherently synergizes with the Tier Element strategy, as opposed to just Kashtira. This card is really good. During the main phase, this is a quick effect. You could special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, banish a Kashtira or Tier Elements card from your hand or graveyard. So basically, this is like a weaker Hobness kind of effect. So like if your opponent goes first, this isn't the greatest going second, but this isn't a bad card to have in your hand on your first turn going first because it does act as an interruption. So like let's say you set up your full Tier Elements board and your opponent starts playing, you can activate Tier Elements Kashtira, banish a tier card from your graveyard. It doesn't even have to be a monster. You could banish like a Solic, a Meta Noise, whatever the case may be. Special summon this also, and then it has another cool effect. If this card is normal or special summon, you can send the top 3 cards of either player's deck to the graveyard. So basically, quick effect, summon the card, banish a tier card from hand or grave, mill 3. So it's basically like Hobness, but a little bit weaker. But another reason why this card is pretty good is if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you could send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So when you do the cute play where you could Kalos into Merrily and mill 8, if you hit this, you're milling 2 more cards. So yeah, I definitely think the card is really cool. It doesn't like seem like it really inherently like synergizes with Kashtira, like the pure Kashtira deck very much. However, I mean it kind of does because you can special summon it without having to normal summon, and it's a level 7. So I mean I guess it kind of does, but I think it's nice to just have another name. But then we do have the Scareclaw Kashtira. I like how they're tying in like the Tier Elements, the Scareclaw, all into like the Kashtira thing. It's actually pretty cool. But this is very similar to Tier Elements Kashtira, except it's a little bit worse, but it just has better stats on it. Because you'll see why. It's basically same thing, quick effect during the main phase, special summon this card from your hand, and banish a Kashtira or Scareclaw from your hand or graveyard. So it's very easy to summon. All you really need is more commonly to have a Kashtira in your grave, just banish like a Fenrir in grave, and then just freely summon this. Also, while this card, it can attack while it's in defense position, and it has a 2600 body. So if it does, apply its defense for damage calculation. It's pretty cool. And then also, you know, a sleeper effect that a lot of people might miss is the effects of any monster that battles your Kashtira or Scareclaw monster are negated until the end of the turn. So it's kind of cute. It might come up in random applications, but these are definitely by far the 2 worst ones. But then we have the most anticipated new one in the main deck, and that is Kashtira Riseheart. Riseheart is the new one that everybody's going crazy about because this one inherently just helps the strategy. Basically, it says if you control a Kashtira monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, it does lock you into XYZ monsters. But during your normal or main phase, if this card was normal or special summoned this turn, banish a Kashtira card from your deck. It doesn't say monster, it says Kashtira card. So that is really, really good. Except itself, of course. But then, in addition to that same effect, all within the same effect, you banish the top 3 cards from your opponent's deck face down, and if you do, this card becomes a level 7. So that's going to inherently synergize with Shangri-La. So if you can make Shangri-La first, and then you make Riseheart, that's kind of crazy, because you're going to be able to block a zone, and yeah, it's going to be very powerful, just being able to block their zones relatively fast. But then, moving on, we have Kashtira Papyrus. This card is basically like the emergency teleport from the deck. For the deck. So you could target a Kashtira monster you control and summon one Kashtira with a different attribute from your deck in defense position. Also, it locks you into XYZs. But if this card becomes banished, this is a whole separate effect. So if this card becomes banished, you could target a banished Kashtira card except this one, and add it to your hands. So yeah, the fact that this does two really cool things is amazing. This is a card that Kashtira really needed because, just having like an emergency teleport for the deck, and it has a really cool effect. The deck is doing a lot of banish shenanigans, and then, like Tier Elements Kashtira can banish this from the graveyard to summon, and then you could trigger both this effect to mill 3, this effect to add a banished Kashtira card. It's really good. It all has inherent synergy. And then we have the weaker one, Kashtira Overlap. This isn't a Kashtira card that I've seen a lot of people playing that have been testing for post-Photon Hypernova. However, it might have its applications in the future, we may never know, but just to go over it, target a monster on the field, banish a monster with 1500 attack and 21 defense from your hand, graveyard, or that is face up on either field, and if you do, the targeted monster gains 1500 attack. Seems pretty weak. If this card becomes banished and you control a Kashtira monster, you could target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects till the end of this turn. Okay. There might be an application where you could side this and go on second, so if you summon Rise Heart, you could banish this and negate a monster, but it still just doesn't seem that good. The first effect is a little too specific, because this only really synergizes with Rise Heart. He's the only monster in the deck that's 1500 attack and 21 defense. So yeah, Overlap is just not that crazy. But then we do have Kashtira Big Bang. I think this is probably the only trap that will be played post Photon Hypernova, but I could be wrong. So basically how it works, if a Kashtira XYZ is on the field, make both players banish monsters from their field face down so that they only control one. So that's pretty cool. If they start flooding the field, this is basically kind of like a needle sealing type effect. You're making them remove all their monsters till they have just one. And then if this card becomes banished, you can target a Kashtira XYZ monster you control, add a Kashtira monster you own attached to it to your hand, and then you can special summon it from your hand. So it gives you the option, which this card is really good because it inherently synergizes onto the last one, is the new boss monster, Kashtira Rise Heart. Basically, kind of tying this into the trap as well. Once per turn, if Kashtira Shangri-La, this one right here, activate its effects this turn, you can also XYZ summon Kashtira Rise Heart by using a Kashtira monster you control and transfer its materials to this card. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So this is inherently like a macro Cosmo type card. And then also once per chain, each time a card is banished, attach one banished card to this card as material. And then once per turn quick effect, you can detach 3 materials from this card and target one card on the field and banish it face down. So if you kind of look at how this synergizes with the trap card, basically this is a mandatory effect. So once per chain, each time a card is banished, that is a mandatory effect. You have to attach a banished card to this card as material. And then Big Bang is going to let you add a monster that you have on your Rise Heart as material, or Shangri-La, you can just add like a Fenrir or Unicorn, whatever you have as material, back to your hands. So that is really cool. But yeah, so let me know what you thought about the new Kashtira cards. I think they're really cool. I think the strategy has a lot of potential moving forward. I definitely think this will be one of the more dominant decks post Photon Hypernova. However, I don't know 100% if it'll be better than pure Tier Elements with like the Ishizus. So, that's all for this video. Just kind of wanted to go over some of the Kashtira cards with you guys and just, I posted a combo tutorial on how the deck works, and I also posted like a deck profile of what you might expect. So with all that being said, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe down below for more content. Let me know what you thought about this video, and I will see you in the next one.